Welcome to a normal video essay about Metal Gear Solid 3. We'll look at the plot, maybe some themes. I certainly wouldn't want anyone to think I play video games. I definitely don't want anyone to know I like them. What is that noise? Is that Fucik? Is that entry of the Gladiators? What is happening? Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of the most celebrated video games of all time, and frankly, I don't think that's nearly enough praise. First published in late 2004 and re-released a year later as MGS3 Subsistence, the version most people know, the game went on to receive a 3DS port, an HD makeover for modern hardware, and eventually a remake, Metal Gear Solid Delta. You may have heard of it. It's one of the most visually stunning games of its time, especially for the Pistones, and was originally intended for the PS3, but development delays with the forthcoming console pushed MGS3 back into the PS2's library, a system that could only barely handle its unchecked ambition. It's a rich game, from animations to audio to raw fidelity, but also in terms of a lineage. Metal Gear began with flat 2D maps, Solid Snake creeping from screen to screen to eventually fight Big Boss. Those earlier, simpler games were overshadowed in cultural memory by Metal Gear Solid, its sequel, MGS2, and finally the prequel, MGS3. While these three games make up a trilogy, at least according to series creator Hideo Kojima, MGS3 is actually a prequel to all of Metal Gear, taking place long before any other title. If viewed from that lens, parts of MGS3 act as commentary on not only its own trilogy, but on the series, on Kojima's creative output. You know, one assumes that part of why it succeeded as much as it did comes from some unquantifiable passion factor, a creator's reflective look at their own legacy. But that's all a little abstract. On its face, MGS3, which we'll be calling Snake Eater where possible, is the story of Jack, codename Naked Snake, and his mission to infiltrate Russian territory to extract the defecting weapons expert Nikolai Sokolov. Snake Eater expects a degree of player familiarity with Metal Gear Solid. It makes use of self-referential humor.
Not in a million years.
It calls back to Johnny Barass himself, and it expects you to put together that Naked Snake is the man who would become Big Boss, knowing that Solid Snake is his genetic clone, something covered in the first Metal Gear Solid. It uses a lot of military jargon and mixes in real historical names and events to disorient you early, gives context, but keeps you mostly out of the loop unless you've done all the reading beforehand. You're stuck in the middle of some heavy stuff.
Soviet Union, President Kennedy, Soviets.
Despite the noise, the game itself is not complicated. You run, crawl, and shoot. For a lot of players, that's most of the gameplay. The critics tend to focus entirely on the plot when it comes to analysis, treating its mechanical quirks as a laundry list of cool stuff to mention. Look at how neat this is, before getting to the material that really matters, right? The boss, Jack's journey, storytelling, themes. And it's expected because you can't look at a Kojima game without realizing it's built out of symbolism and movies. Most game analysis ever is caught up riding the coattails of literary criticism because games analysis is relatively young. A lot of humanities students out there. But thankfully, Snake Eater isn't a book or a film, it's a video game. And the way the player interacts with it, the way the player engages with its systems, is also a form of storytelling and equally worthy of analysis. Maybe more so. Interactivity is the medium's signature, the thing that sets it apart from others. At the very least, those systems and the ways they grant the player agency work in tandem with the plot to produce the narrative of any particular game. When it comes to games analysis, mechanics aren't an optional include. They're a key component. It matters that shooting the sniper boss's lookout parrot will make him upset and aggressive, more difficult to deal with. It's not just a cute quirk, but it's minor, so people let it slide. Kojima's games have often been accused of being obsessed with the filmic instead of the ludic, like he's not a big enough gamer or something. But I think those critics are missing valuable insight that's easily gained, but just as easily glossed, depending on their individual level of engagement with its systems and mechanics. It can pay to game Like, not a lot, but sometimes. That said, you have to be curious enough to go looking. What, you want me to care that Snake can inflict sleep on himself with a chloroform rag to tank incoming missiles? Yeah, describing the gameplay turns into Mad Libs pretty quick, and it probably doesn't help things. Of course, critics and analysts probably fixate on the story alone because Snake Eater isn't really any good at teaching players to play it. I'll show you what I mean. You enter the world as Naked Snake, CIA operative on the Virtuous mission. You're explicitly told multiple times that this is a sneaking mission. Violence, sounding alarms, detection will not be tolerated. But that isn't strictly true. You won't hit the game over screen just for being detected. It's just your handler here and your mentor, the boss, both lay out player expectations clearly.
The point of this mission is to sneak through the jungle without being seen.
You're meant to avoid contact with enemies, and if you do run into impossible obstacles, you neutralize them with the tranquilizer gun, or CQC, close quarters combat. And regardless of what happens during the mission, you have no immediate access to lethal weapons unless you go looking. So, tranq gun and melee it is.
Snake, try to remember some of the basics of CQC.
Despite this message, you're never actually taught CQC during a typical run. You have to use the manual to learn specifics, or call on your own time. Metal Gear consistently allowed melee combat across its many games, punches and kicks, as a last-ditch burst option to handle enemies. But in Snake Eater, it's an entire element of play. It's explained in-universe as a unique martial art devised by Jack and the boss, an efficient way to non-lethally neutralize enemy combatants, while maintaining easy access to a gun. The very first time I played Snake Eater, I didn't use the CQC button, and it has a whole button for anything other than the basic melee combo, the same way melee is used in the preceding Metal Gear Solid games. Give them a little bop bop bop. Lacking clear instructions and a paper manual because I played the HD collection via PSN, I was content using the tranq gun and slipping past my problems. And after watching a whole lot of Snake Eater material, I think that's how a lot of people, probably most people, handle the game as well, at least until they get access to actual firearms. Just slinking and darting. Because why would you risk it? You were told to keep it low-key. I can't risk getting yelled at by a video game character, man. I got trauma. If you try beating on dudes anyway, you'll eventually trigger an alert when you fail to knock them out in a single combo. And Snake can take a lot of punishment, but nobody likes getting shot at. Blaring noises. You know, when Sonic starts drowning, you don't go, yippee! This is a fun sound. You were told to sneak, and you're not really sure how all that CQC works, so you don't bother. I became Solid Snake in that playthrough, not Jack, a pale echo of the ultimate mercenary. I like to think the omission of a proper CQC tutorial is a feature, not a mistake. You're effectively baited into that older, expected style of play. I know how to play Metal Gear Solid. You don't need to teach me how to play Metal Gear Solid. Cut that? And this dynamic makes it kind of jarring when, mere screens away from the beginning, Naked Snake finds himself surrounded by an elite enemy unit. Their leader, Ocelot, is cocky, shoots another competing faction of soldiers dead with impossible, mind-bending shots, and sets his sights on Jack. He mocks your quaint combat stance, insults you directly, but when his gun jams, Jack lays out the entire Ocelot unit by himself, non-lethally, follows his orders to the letter. Doesn't even draw blood. While the player may have questions about Big Boss, like, how'd he turn into Sean Connery? The character gets a solid outline, perfectly calm, an expert fighter, and a teacher, even a father figure. He doesn't mock or harm Ocelot, an apparent enemy operative who insulted him and then tried to kill him. Instead, he reacts with patience, compliments his shooting, explains that he screwed up and should get a different kind of weapon for next time, and lets him live. Makes it kind of hard to see him as a villain. Jack probably picked up this behavior from the boss, his mentor, who's actually something like a mother figure to the guy, someone who, quote, owns half of his soul, who refers to the soldiers she trains as her sons, someone who scolds you throughout the virtuous mission if you screw around, get caught. Smoke because she taught him everything he knows, and she's almost like a Valkyrie or a goddess of war. Maybe due to his nature or due to his upbringing, to Jack, the battlefield is recreational, or at least educational, a place to improve and belong. And this is a hard pill to swallow. We know Big Boss ends up a villain, a legendary mercenary. He did war crimes, bro. He used child soldiers, and worse than that, he committed ruse. But here, in the beginning, everyone assumes he's an amateur, a rookie. Ocelot, the guy in the plane.
Does this pantywaist know what he's doing?
And probably even the player, given his weird naivete and poor social skills.
Snake, didn't I teach you how to jag off by yourself?
People assume he's an idiot until he demonstrates his worth. For Jack, the virtuous mission is probably something like a piano recital, a performance. So how do I do that? I just crept around and shot darts. You're telling me I can toss people like ragdolls? CQC is absolutely critical to Snake Eater. You know, the mechanic they don't even have a pop-up reminder about. Because it has real narrative significance, and because melee is unquestionably the strongest tool in the game. While the beginner will likely ignore the option entirely, a skilled player knows that they never have to shoot a tranq dart, never have to kill if they don't want to. Maybe minus some of the bosses. To win the game, simply approach an enemy, press and hold the CQC button while holding a direction, and you'll slam any generic soldier to the ground, knocking them out instantly. No fuss, no complicated setup, they're effectively neutralized unless a comrade wakes them up. Even better if you simply grapple them by doing the same input without holding a direction, and release them by depressing the button depending on which version you're playing. Snake will quickly slit their throat. While you can interrogate enemy soldiers, throw them from the held position, etc., CQC's easiest applications, lowest effort applications, are the quickest ways to down any normal soldier in the game. And for someone named after a handless creature, snakes reach far. Didn't realize we were playing Smash. You can land this throw without triggering an alert, and even if you do, it'll quickly tick down to nothing if the thrown enemy is the only person who saw you. You don't even have to be subtle. Just run around, slamming everyone you see into Mother Russia's cold bosom. Well, what about the knife? It's true that shoving the pointy end into any regular soldier will kill them instantly, but the knife stops Snake's momentum so he can jab in exactly the direction he's facing. It doesn't have the wide-range hitbox of CQC. It's limited, less forgiving, and draws blood needlessly, except in some niche cases where you can take out multiple guards at once. It's important that the knife is less useful than CQC. And to be clear, guns are not easier to use than CQC. This isn't a traditional third-person shooter. You can't aim and shoot while running around freely, twin-stick style, unless you're playing Delta. You're made to stop, aim, finagle a clear shot, preferably to the dome on these pin-headed, sometimes camouflaged, lightly swaying targets with controls that cannot be conveyed unless experienced. They don't handle great. Guns in Snake Eater suck. They suck to use. They trigger alerts, which spawn more enemies, and they're limited by ammo. The best and most consistent way to aim a gun in Metal Gear Solid 3 involves equipping the binoculars, lining up the camera on an enemy's head, and quickly swapping to a gun to unload a shot. I am not making that up. CQC is mechanically privileged, impossibly simple, the preferred option. And you have to read and experiment to learn it. You have to become a student of the boss to access the strongest tool. No equipment, just knowledge. All things you probably won't be doing if you're a newcomer trying your cool new game, too scared of setting off an alarm, failing the mission, not wanting to let your handler down. They probably made CQC as strong as it is because otherwise, all those cutscene moves would create too much distance between player Snake and cutscene Snake. You should get at least a taste of all of that. In this world, people control beams, shoot lightning, aim well. Eventually, you reach the end of the virtuous mission. After successfully locating Sokolov and attempting extraction, your path is blocked by the boss. She's defecting to the Soviet Union. She takes Sokolov, rendering your mission a failure. She disarms you, destroying your confidence, and she hurls you off the bridge in a final parting gesture.
Jack, you can't come with us.
The weight of your almost mother's betrayal felt in frame and spelled out mechanically on Jack's broken body. Yeah, you're gonna have to patch yourself up, buddy. She won't. He survives the fall, but barely. His old preconceptions, his self-image, all shattered as he's bathed in the light of a nuclear explosion, the boss's gift to the Soviets, a baptism by water and flame. This is Jack transitioning from childhood to adolescence. Symbolically, I mean. We have canon evidence that Jack comes.
When did you start reading magazines like that? Didn't I teach you how to take care of business without having to rely on that sort of thing?
It wouldn't matter if you, the player, knew CQC. It's part of why it's left unexplained. Jack was never going to beat his mentor in combat, and that's because
he has not yet found an emotion to carry into battle.
you have no idea who you are, what you stand for, and without your anchor, you're adrift in the world. So now it's time to figure out where Big Boss came from.
Currently flying over the Arctic Ocean.
Snake Eater starts for real in the aftermath of the Virtuous mission. You're dropped in at night, no teacher to watch over you, and told there's no longer a stealth requirement, no anti-violence protocol. You're free to handle the mission as you see fit.
Eliminate the boss. Understood. Commencing operation.
Clown Fiesta. You start with very little, but the boss herself is about to hand you a reason to push yourself. She rides in on a white horse, disarms you, once again shattering your confidence, maybe even your masculinity, and alerts a nearby patrol with an explosion. She won't kill you, but she could. And now it's sink or swim. Soldiers are en route, and she tells you explicitly, you have to choose your country or your beliefs.
The mission or your beliefs?
Beliefs. Sorry, your mentor, your mother, cast you off, called you a child, left you for dead, and even threatened your life. You're not good enough. This is minutes into the second mission, and then you get a call from your handler.
You've lost your weapon, right? That means you've got no chance of winning in a battle situation.
Jack, caught between his allegiance to his country and to the person he loves the most, is told by one side that he needs to choose what to believe in, and told by the other that he can't hope to win in a fight against a common patrol squad. But you should know better. You should know that you can. So here's where you choose. Your handler's way, sneaking, hiding, running, like many players probably do, never having the opportunity to become their own person, or take the boss's route, CQC and whatever other tools you have, embracing the battlefield. And this encounter should be easy. It'd be over in a couple quick throws if you stood your ground. And hey, you're on terrain you already know. You were just here in the Virtuous mission. Now that you've had gameplay scaffolded through a series of screens and a big battle with an enemy unit, you have a fresh chance to whoop the enemy's ass and feel that sense of mechanical mastery. Feel like you've grown, just after you were cast off for being a child. Do you choose to believe what other people tell you about yourself? Do you let the boss or the CIA write your story for you? Well, you can. Or you can choose to answer exactly who Big Boss was. This is the moment the adolescent, 30-something man, is made to find his own identity, and in games, the player's identity comes down to systems and mechanics. One of the smallest identity-defining decisions involves your choice of firearm. In the Virtuous mission, you only had your tranq gun, but heading back to Russia, you're armed with a real pistol. Not long after meeting the boss, though, you'll gain access to another tranq pistol. Either weapon is CQC compatible. The question is, are you a killer or not? Until Metal Gear Solid 5, and maybe even still, I would call Snake Eater the most mechanically minded Metal Gear game. The first two built up to this set of systems, and MGS4, while more modern, was a fairly streamlined contributor to that era of over-the-shoulder shooters. It features unfinished or underutilized mechanics and the same shooting controls as everyone else. And more than all that, it doesn't do nearly as much narrative work with its mechanics as MGS3. We aren't figuring out who Snake is, only how age has affected him. Snake Eater teaches you about fixing your broken bones by having Jack suffer an immeasurable personal betrayal and survive. Snake Eater teaches you to want to learn its CQC mechanics with a striking demonstration in a cutscene, and an example to live up to. Snake Eater makes you maintain your stamina meter, makes you eat food, usually animals you hunt in the wild, like crabs. Snake Eater lets you naturally recover health by waiting around. Snake Eater strips your sonar, access to enemy vision cones, and gives you cheap, battery-operated gear instead. You have to experience scarcity, inconvenience to access gameplay features that older games hand you. You have to be more present in the game world. Snake Eater is a game where, if you ingest poison, you can spin Snake around in a menu, like physically rotate him until he pukes it up. Or just use medicine. A lot of Jack's life, at least as much as the game is willing to share, is represented in systems. Snake Eater is the most mechanically minded Metal Gear game, but one should not assume it makes the game colder, more robotic because of it. Just because mechanics have rules and limits, or because they're predictable, a kiss before work, a hug after, those can be cold because they're routine, but they don't have to be. Mechanics are expression, controls, systems, and features. The interactable parts of play are where the player is given room to exist in the game. Their actions become identity. Even if we acknowledge that gameplay is abstraction, that player actions are not actual canon reality, I don't think John RPGman shot 300 fireballs at monsters over 30 minutes to hit max level. The player is still given the chance to negotiate the identity of whoever they're controlling, even if it's only in small ways. Do you like sneaking? Shooting? Using the cardboard box? Lighting people on fire? And to be clear, this isn't some flippant, abstract, high-minded bullshit. In Snake Eater, it's the point. Big Boss is a bit of a problem character. He was introduced as a deranged villain and referred to in reverent tones throughout Metal Gear Solid. That story had aspirations for Big Boss, made him a legend by making Snake a legend, and his genetic clone, mentioning the incident in Zanzibar, showing how people react to the name Big Boss. Simply by carving out the shape of a legend with words and references, Big Boss became a towering figure in universe. And with the natural gap created by console generations, plenty of newer players had no real concept of who the guy was. If a newcomer asks, who exactly is Big Boss? The dev shouldn't be answering with, here's a list of facts. What they should do, what they did, is feed that legend, create a liquid space by leaving room for player interpretation. It's brilliant. Make a larger-than-life character and let players spin the yarn themselves. He's a living tall tale. Big Boss was a ghost who could floor a room of guards without ever raising suspicion. Big Boss was a blood-crazed monster who could clear a whole room in seconds without so much as a scratch. Big Boss was a flailing maniac who lit guards on fire for fun and wore a crocodile's head into battle, terrified his enemies into submission. I mean, it's possible, whether or not it works with the narrative of the original Metal Gear Solid, the Twin Snakes remake leans into this legendary tall tale soldier vibe as well. But for Solid Snake, had him pitch a grenade right down the tank's barrel. Yeah, well, I could do that. Because these characters are the stuff of legends, it'd be weird if the mechanics didn't make room for them. Snake Eater gives you full creative license over play. You can embody the Rambo-esque jungle gunman with a fully stocked arsenal, become the boss's greatest student by mastering CQC, embrace the shadows and ghost through the game, or simply become the jester. If you want to trank dart someone in the chest, which will knock them out in a set period but not instantly, then break through a window, attract their attention with footsteps, and roll into a door to smash the hinges, hitting the guard and triggering the dart to kick in fully because you knocked him down, you can do that. Because while Big Boss became someone, there's a plausible case for any and all of these backgrounds. Did he value the CIA's instructions over the boss's words? At least in his state of conflict? Was he consumed by a need for bloody revenge? It all depends on how the player chooses to act. You were young in the tutorial, the virtuous mission. You were just learning the possibilities. And now you're free to walk your own path, find your own emotion to carry into battle. And many people don't, or at least don't ever explore their full potential. I think the game is often played with all the personality of a cardboard box because of two major factors. First, the game doesn't drag very often. It's tight. Encounters are interesting and specific. Another cutscene, another boss is just around any given corner. Why wait? In some ways, it's too good of a game for the average first-timer to stop and linger. The other big thing is the stealth context. As a stealth game, you're punished when you're caught, swarmed by enemies, making it hard for the average player to learn the game's intricacies without running it through numerous times. Because no one wants to play around for fun, only to get caught for a small mistake, forcing a reset, a loading screen, that or a prolonged battle with spawning guards. Have you ever hid in this game, waiting out the alert timer? Feels like a hunger strike. And it's a shame because Snake Eater is surprisingly robust. You can toy with the guards, make engagement a game, as long as you know what you're doing. Stealth is easy if you don't go loudly pounding around enemies. You can walk slower with a lighter touch, but with the D-pad you can creep, making your footsteps silent. Pair this movement with a sudden full step to notify a guard from behind, but keep your position unknown. You can dance around guards in this way, even combine it with a roll to avoid detection completely. Of course, a real master knows that pulling the pin on a grenade of any kind, preferably a chaff or smoke grenade, those things that usually rot away in your inventory, will actually silence your footsteps, presumably due to a programming error, meaning you can run around behind enemies with impunity, completely undetected unless you're careless. Look at this guy. This man is a menace! Part of why MGS3 remains great is its reliance on robust, open-ended play. A lot of games, and especially modern games, are designed like a tall glass of soda. You drink it, it's done, you don't think about it again. MGS3 was also constructed more or less like that, but allows for so much more. Games within the game, if you actually engage with it, instead of treating it like a film or a chore. Your camo index, how visible you are to enemies, is hardly an issue, as long as you avoid direct eye contact and learn how to sneak like a cartoon character. Once you've mastered stealth and stepping, you can add in other mechanics. Though you're never taught to hold enemies up, approaching from behind and aiming a gun will make Snake threaten the guard, cause them to toss their gun down, and afterwards you can do what you like. Run away, plant an explosive on their body, burn them alive with your torch! Or simply point at their head or groin to rob them up to 5 times. You can resupply this way and even make enemies drop valuable books, which you can place to bait and effectively deactivate any regular soldier. Because dudes love reading. If you understand the core features of the system, which are all completely optional and incredibly easy to ignore, any given screen becomes a playground or a stage. Punching isn't normally powerful, but hitting an unaware enemy, waiting a half second and punching again repeatedly will stun-lock any enemy guard and eventually knock them out, before they have a chance to respond or raise an alarm. For the truly demented, knock an enemy out or wound each of their limbs mid-battle, blast their radio too, and watch them limp around the screen searching for you. Be a real shame if someone planted a bomb right there. You can interrogate enemies for vaguely useful information, but sometimes you get codec numbers that'll let you call in fire support. Neutralize a combat situation without lifting a finger. Consider the quaint cardboard box. A less experienced player might consider it a meme inclusion, a tired, flickering torch carried into this third game for tradition's sake. A more advanced player might be aware that the box will grant access to an infiltration spot if they sit in a specific place. But a real master, a real box-hauling son of a bitch, knows that the cardboard box is an all-purpose tool that functions both as a proactive stealth utility and the ultimate battle armor. As long as the player is equipped with the box, running into an enemy directly will force them to briefly recoil as the box falls away. The player is then free during this brief pause to use CQC before an alert is triggered, knocking them out at no cost. You lower your risk of being seen and get a totally unambiguous window to abuse CQC, in case you struggle with the grapple's range otherwise. But even if a guard notices the box because the aspiring jester had nowhere else to hide, you're not at risk of being caught unless you're surrounded by other attentive guards or fail to act in time. As a curious soldier lifts the box, you have a window to quickly dash behind the enemy and handle them as you see fit, without them noticing. CQC, punch to the weak point, hold them up with a gun. For a creative player, the setup is the cold half of the mechanics, and the punchline is the expression. Either way, you're telling a joke. One of the trickier setups involves baiting guards, either with a good book or alerting them directly, having already placed a claymore explosive and turning them into mulch by waving the chloroform rag in front of your face 3 times, putting you to sleep, and making Snake fall forward, fully invincible, onto the trap. Grenades are a bit of a pain to aim. Now you can eliminate the guesswork. The player is equipped with a fake death pill, a spy tool, and while it's typically used to avoid combat and trick bosses for a cheap shot, then canceled out with the revival pill, if you equip a torch, crouch, and take the pill, incoming guards will inspect your corpse and burn themselves to death through proximity with the torch. The torch is so good. It's found in a dark cave, a simple support item that can double as a melee weapon, but the developers chose to give the fire a hitbox, which only damages enemies after prolonged exposure, instead of making it purely aesthetic. With the torch, you can burn guards who are bearing down on you from above while you swim. You could light any unaware enemy on fire, even slip through a guard's shield. Snake Eater asks, why shoot a man when you can just rub him out? Why shoot a man when the cancer might do it for you? The game generously spills a wealth of options for player expression into their hands, and without any kind of fanfare. A more modern game, a lesser game, would probably make use of player loadouts or a skill tree. What class did you pick? I'm the Saboteur! I'm the Saboteur! And all of these tricks, these weird ways to play, are simple player actions. Gameplay is as boring or as flashy as you make it, but I consider it effective role-playing to swerve on guards like it's a hobby. We saw what Snake gets out of combat. We know he's better than any other soldier. Why not express that with mechanics? Anyone can shoot a gun, but it takes a real menace to step with clown-shoed feet into a war zone. And for anyone even vaguely aware of the ending, I'd argue there's a good narrative reason to make heavy use of CQC or turn any battle into a circus. Either way, there's still a broader world to consider. The environment is actually a major contributor to the narrative of Snake Eater. You're on a do-or-die mission, facing impossible odds, armed only with what you find and fed only by what you forage. It's partly why the game has so many bizarro spy tools and otherwise common objects that slot into, where a gun normally goes. You're meant to be a survivor. Things are always diminishing. Your health, your stamina, bullets, batteries. You're caught in a constant state of upkeep and making do when something runs out. There's at least some justification for all of the clown business and relying on your innate ability. You can't rely on any one thing forever. The game world itself, the jungle, is just an enormous extrapolation of this concept. It's kill or be killed out there, and everything's always looking to fill up. You probably wouldn't have to worry about upkeep in a flat, sterile base, and so it's only here, in the third Metal Gear Solid title, that the player is made to crawl through grass, rely on nature for protection, swim through leech-ridden water, worry about whether a mushroom is poisonous, respect the wildlife. You're an outsider in this ecosystem, and the game isn't shy about it. Snakes lurk in the tall grass, and while they make for a good meal, some are poisonous and will bite you if you get too close. Animals can expose your position if you're careless. You're made to slowly wade into the water and paddle through this swamp. And while you can dive to move a little faster, the controls are a little chaotic and the thing's full of crocodiles, which will kill you in a single bite, by the way. It wants you to slow down and humble yourself, recognize your place in the food chain, which parallels Jack fighting and eventually killing each member of the Cobra unit. This little screen happens right after the second encounter with the Ocelot unit, so after you flex your military prowess, you're not only given the chance to take a breather, you're also made to carefully maneuver around deadly, well-camouflaged reptiles, because you might be the combat king, but here in the jungle, you're dead if you're not paying attention. As if to remind the player of this fact, once you exit the swamp, you'll notice your stamina bar is draining. And opening the medical panel, it's because you're covered in leeches, which you need a cigar to burn away. You're food in a suit. Never forget that. And the environment is challenging even without the animals. While camouflage helps the player avoid detection, enemies can be frustrating to pick out of dense foliage. Multiple stretches of the game are loaded with traps that grass helps conceal. Make no mistake, if the devs decided to place prone gunmen and increase trap density, you'd be looking more like a wild hog than a son of the boss.
Let's not forget the pitch-black cave where you're forced to go digging around for a torch or use a cigar or wait for Snake's eyes to adjust naturally.
Elevation matters. Multiple screens are more challenging to navigate because you're climbing uphill, which factors heavily into a boss battle even. In fact, the actual boss arenas are almost always challenging by design. You have to mind the geography. Non-experts will have to accommodate the world to succeed. You don't blend into grass dressed as a brick, and you don't get to place your own trees. That'd take years, man. Come on, think. And you're alone out there, so it's on the player to respect the shape of the world and find their place in it. That's really what the jungle symbolizes. The adolescent Jack is spiritually, not physically, made to stand on his own 2 feet. Mechanics inform the story informs the mechanics. And the world isn't only an obstacle. Like we've covered, Snake Eater is about choosing what you believe in and what kind of play suits you best. It encourages curiosity, and the environment is just another masterable element of play. You can't change the environment, but you can learn it. You can identify which mushrooms are poisonous and toss them to enemies, stunning or outright killing them. You can tranquilize certain snakes, spiders, scorpions, and frogs, hurl them at guards from afar, and depending on the creature and how you toss it, you can distract or lethally poison the enemy. Biology can be just as useful as weaponry. You're made to engage with the jungle pretty routinely because Snake is always hungry. But gathered food also goes bad, and like you'd expect, the guards will eat expired food, letting you slip by. Even the humble fruit, the completely fictional Russian mango, can be useful for the enterprising jungle master. Butting up against the edges of the game space, its hard rules and limits, the player can still find room for creative expression. Because sure, you don't have to do any of this. You can waltz through a normal playthrough knowing almost nothing. But this game is asking a simple question: who was Big Boss? And that question's answer is informed by a million players telling the story their own way. It would be a mistake to look at all these mechanical quirks and decide the play is entirely weightless, because player actions have direct narrative implications. And to be clear, some gameplay segments aren't freeform because of the story. There are exactly 3 segments of the game where the player's options are almost entirely cropped down. First is the virtuous mission, the beginning segment, before Jack finds an emotion to carry into battle and decides what he believes in. It restricts your options because at that time, Jack isn't a full individual. Second is most of the ending segment after the return to Groznygrad, where you're forced into a series of boring shootouts in Eva's bike and given unlimited ammo, which occurs after the fight with the Sorrow. To be clear, after Snake is judged for his actions in the main game, and once he's finally en route to accomplish his final mission, killing the boss. That's when the systemic freedom is stripped away. That's when Jack's hurtle toward his inevitable fate too fast to enjoy the ride, because it's out of his control. They put someone else in the driver's seat to make it plain. You've had your fun, but now it's time to face reality. The third example is the short leg of the game after Jack loses an eye, which is especially worthy of mention because it further expounds on the relationship between Jack and the boss. We know Jack has more affection for her than any other person, and while she's kind, or at least measured and poised, most of the game involves Jack being emasculated by this person, thrown off a bridge, left to die. And throughout the game, she doesn't diffuse situations by physically harming other people except for you. Instead, she disarms soldiers, breaks their guns down, and controls the room with poise. She does this multiple times, to Jack, to Ocelot. Even Volgan is visibly afraid of her. So, after killing most of the Cobra unit, you're made to infiltrate Groznygrad, and it requires you to play like a spy, swapping between multiple costumes and handling the situation with a delicate touch. And when you're revealed, confronted once again by the boss, she humiliates you, calls your outfit stupid, and scolds you for sneaking around, because you're a soldier, and this doesn't suit you. The torture scene comes next, which physically damages Snake. He loses an eye even, but what's important to notice, and almost always ignored, is Jack's CQC. Typically, CQC requires you to equip a compatible gun, the knife, or your bare hands. You can't use it with a torch or a grenade equipped, for example. Here, you're stuck with a revolver which isn't compatible. You also find a fork, mechanically similar to the knife, but it's not compatible. So you unequip yourself and try with your bare hands. And you can't. The last time you met, the boss said if she saw you again, she'd kill you. Instead, she spares your life, helps you out, insults you, and leaves you to Volgan. And this experience is so traumatic for Jack, she kind of succeeds anyway. Snake temporarily loses access to his most efficient combat style, his signature. and his superpower. He can punch and kick, but he cannot throw, cannot hold, cannot genuinely make use of CQC. His identity is shaken. His relationship is fractured. Remember, they developed CQC together. It seems like a mechanical extrapolation of the narrative reality that Jack can't bring himself to. It hurts too much.
I don't know if I can trust anybody.
Jack and the boss have a deep bond, an arguably Freudian relationship. This is the person who molded Jack into the man who would become Big Boss, even if it was geopolitics that ultimately created the monster. She taught him everything, made him so strong, he helped jointly craft a new martial art with her. And that, the joy of battle, combat, etc., was the essence of their connection. It's not a mistake that CQC is judo-esque, involves grapples, holds, and throws. Symbolically, it's about connecting to other people, touching another's soul. It's almost like an embrace, parental. Jack giving Ocelot honest feedback and genuinely helping him improve is just an echo of how the boss treated Jack and how CQC manifests on the battlefield, a crashing wave that knocks everyone down but uplifts the worthy. After all, Ocelot is a long-standing series character. You may be wondering about how all of this applies to other versions of the games. After all, Snake Eater was originally released with a traditional top-down camera like other Metal Gear Solid games, allowing the player the ability to push their vision out in any given direction to a point, but otherwise forcing them to respect the off-screen space. Enemies have pretty good eyesight, especially when the game is framed like this, and you really have to mind your camouflage or pop into first-person mode to get a clear read on the terrain. Hard to believe there was a time when these flowing blades of grass weren't the linchpin of the visuals. Just looking at this version's camera system, it's easy to see why some tools, namely the sonar and the directional mic, were included at all. Like I mentioned, older MGS games used a mini-map with easy access information, but in this older world, during a mission with scant resources, they're a limited privilege. A privilege that's comedically reduced with the transition into an over-the-shoulder perspective. I can't fully condemn Delta when Subsistence here was re-released with a fresh and more desirable camera angle to better fit player preferences. While I originally set out to compare every major version of MGS3, I pivoted away from that framing because it's not a particularly helpful conversation to have. While it'd be fun to point out how frustrating Delta's modern sensibilities are, it's worth noting that the commonly accepted best version of MGS3, Subsistence, already did to MGS3 what Delta did 20 years earlier. Modernized it, streamlined the experience, rendered old mechanics irrelevant. For the most part, anyway. There's still a few viable use cases, but they're niche. Still, Delta did a whole lot more than ruin a couple of items, and didn't really add all that much to compensate. I'm not strictly against remakes, while I don't have any interest in playing most of them, except for maybe comparison's sake, because a lot of them exist for cynical reasons and making more money on an established property, and they enable incuriosity and general audience disengagement by quote-unquote improving the graphics and mechanics, which is almost never the case. I still like when more people experience something cool than not at all. If you emulate a game and it's not perfect, well, at least you got to look at the thing. You know, imagine being the guy who tells you you're drinking your beer wrong because it isn't room temperature. Nobody likes you. Nobody wants to be around you. You're a social dead end, man, come on! But Delta plays around a little too much with the colors for my taste. No, the filters are not an effective substitute, just a slapdash band-aid fix. And seriously, you think the greeny, yellowy tinge of the original needs fixing? Do you have some issue understanding the deep symbology of piss in Kojima's games? All the models look like bizarre latex golems stiffly shuffling about because this level of fidelity doesn't match the PS2 model work, and worst of all, it actively undermines the narrative, because mechanics are part of the narrative, and there it is. They modernize the mechanics. Don't trust anyone who looks at MGS3 and thinks, this is too stiff. It controls beautifully. It's a PS2 game, and it came after MGS2. Like playing this isn't rocket science. Every input has a place. It gives the player an incredible degree of control over Snake. And really, the only issue is taking a session or two to get familiar. This dodge roll is legendary, feels amazing, it's highly useful for avoiding detection, and they took it out. so Snake can sluggishly work himself into a realistic dive. I mean, how video gamey. What fun. But the changes to movement are otherwise pretty minor. If anything, they've been altered for convenience, bringing MGS3 into the modern meta landscape of expected control schemes, while adding a dash of realism to something that doesn't really benefit from it. I don't know if you remember the B guy, but this game doesn't need to be perfectly mechanically grounded. I mentioned guns. Guns are weird in most versions of Snake Eater. You have to aim, struggle to line up a clean shot with no laser sight to guide you, trust in the iron, and pull. Even though Snake is a highly trained soldier, he's significantly better at CQC, which, as we've established, serves a narrative goal. While he's using CQC, he's acting like his mentor. He's reaching out and connecting on the field of battle. It's the simplest thing in the game, and it's a non-violent solution. So why is the lethal option suddenly so much stronger? The guns in Delta are the guns you shoot in Mass Effect 3, Uncharted, really any big-budget over-the-shoulder third-person shooter. You can whip them out and unload with deadly efficiency, making gunplay the easiest way to handle anything on screen by far. You can run and gun with ease, limiting the damage you take in an already forgiving game, outside of harder difficulties. This doesn't make the game worse to play. In fact, it only makes it smoother. But what are the narrative consequences? Subsistence, just by shifting perspective, removed one layer of mechanical cruft from the game, something that was admittedly minor because you could just as easily belly crawl through most of the game before. Delta, though, with its small mechanical improvements, removes any friction the player might experience delivering lethal force to their enemies. Just try using the revolver for a full run of Subsistence. I'd rather chug paint, and I think those stiffer controls served a purpose. Whether or not it was intentional, the physical experience and the psychological outcome was only reaching for guns when you thought you really needed them, because they only cause compounding problems with the alert system. For most people, that means mainly shooting at bosses, which are otherwise immune to your other moves. Bosses which all have two distinct health bars, life and stamina. Bosses that you can tackle non-lethally if you know what you're doing. Naked Snake, Jack, started on a strictly non-violent mission to extract a defector. He went as far as flooring a whole enemy squad with his bare hands. And he didn't just do it coldly, he did it with warmth, with a guiding hand. While you're free to choose what you believe in on your return to Russia, free to abandon the path the boss set you on at any time. Making guns highly accessible and highly efficient as an option only diminishes the weight of taking human life, and it discourages mastery of the game's unique mechanics. Those controls were weird, so mastery was a real thing. It elevated Ocelot's sharpshooting ability by drawing a distinction between him and the player, using mechanical reality, and diminished their overall effectiveness compared to Delta. It left room for other items to shine in the system. Not to mention the CQC system writ large, because an easier, more instantly understandable system when you've already handled in other games is a tab away. It's not that Jack wouldn't kill, or that killing is even antithetical to the game, just that it diminishes what MGS3 is. Snake Eater is the story of how Jack became Big Boss. He was a little aloof, but sweet, hardly a murderer. You can make him a murderer if you want to, you can be a villain. But you have to engage with the game in mechanically challenging ways to actively, consistently, and efficiently take life. You always have to make that choice yourself. You choose to shoot the bosses dead when you can't figure out a non-lethal solution, when you aren't good or skilled or knowledgeable enough. You get ranked higher for lower levels of violence, for all the same reasons. One of the bosses scales directly with how many people you've killed. Snake Eater wants you to think about violence and what it's doing to Jack. Did he ever have a chance, or was someone else controlling his future the entire time? Is this what the battlefield was always destined to be for him? It doesn't condemn violence, this is war, but puts your finger on the trigger. And it presents all of these tools as mere options, a torch given all the weight of an assault rifle. You get caught sneaking, the alert triggers, you find yourself fumbling for your gun, you take a few shots but it's too late, the alarm is sounding, and now you're in for a real clown fiesta. A haze of blood and bullets, and it's not over till you're dead. Or I could just play Delta and be the perfect killing machine and barely struggle with whole waves of guards. The theme of this remake was to create a remake that is too faithful, paying the utmost respect to the original work. I believe we largely achieved that goal. I think the kicker is the dart gun has a little arc, making it harder to use now than regular guns. One of the non-violent solutions is harder to use. Some of the game's minor mechanical quirks are gone as well. It's not a completely different game, and the clown Fiesta is still very much alive. Opportunities for player expression are mostly intact, but it's all a little more grounded. Aiming, movement, especially movement, and that's a shame because Snake Eater's mechanics absolutely do not need to adhere to the tyranny of realism. The thing about these absurd mechanics, all this funny business, is how it actively supports the magical nature of the game's world. Snake Eater places the player firmly in a specific time, in a specific place, under the pretense of engaging with alternate history, invoking the names of real USA codebreakers, real people, and then drops you in a Russian jungle. Yeah, I don't think so. Even if we acknowledge that certain areas in Central Asia vaguely resemble this kind of environment, kind of, multiple characters are clearly superhuman, transparently magical. Almost anyone who walks on screen either looks ridiculous or is legitimately ridiculous. Eva knocks out Ocelot with a motorcycle uppercut. This guy spills Russian secrets because you complimented his shoes. This old man is photosynthetic. I don't think I can add to that. And there's tension in that kind of framing. Why keep things so low-key? Why drop the player into a real-world geopolitical conflict, make them struggle with the environment, and ground them in the world, only to evaporate the narrative's weight with nonsense? This method of blending the unapologetically fictional with the historically non-fictional is called hyperreality, which is a term that generally refers to fiction and non-fiction blended at such a rate as to confuse the viewer into wondering what's real and what isn't. If we were doing literary criticism, the term would probably be magic realism, things that defy reality set alongside the entirely mundane. In either case, you're meant to wonder what's real and what isn't. Hyperreality happens to be a powerful framing device for this particular plot. It's the origin story of the legendary Big Boss, a tall tale through and through. So, yes, Naked Snake went to a Russian jungle where he lit hundreds of enemy soldiers on fire with a torch and fought a photosynthetic sniper by waiting till he died of old age. And his dick was this big. The environment, the game's setting, flirts with passing substantiality, but if you think for even a second, it's laughable, obviously a joke. And what happens in that setting, between the player's input and the plot, has no material ties to reality. It's not a mistake that the player can hunt the mythical Japanese Tsuchinoko, that you can find snakes named after Solid, Liquid, and Solidus in the final boss fight, that her scars slither away, or even that you can survive explosions with invincibility frames. As far as we know, everything about this backstory is fictional. A small piece of Cold War history doomed to an erosive telephone game amongst soldiers, consigned to the oral tradition of storytelling. That's a pretty abstract analysis, but even if it's not convincing yet, we have to consider the broader plot, the bosses, and how mechanics help tell the game's story. Because the kind of elevated reality suggested by play mechanics is cohesive with the hyperreality of the scripted events. I've already called attention to this early line from the boss.
He has not yet found an emotion to carry into battle.
And it's worth paying attention to for the way it relates to the player, but also to the other members of the Cobra unit, the boss's sons, all people who presumably found an emotion to carry into battle. She tells you repeatedly that you need to choose your own path, and that path reveals itself in the player's choices during unscripted gameplay. No matter what that path is, it's an expression of a found emotion, a manifestation of will, the only way Snake can eventually beat the boss. But how does the player's will stack up against others? In a way, this small line is an incredible justification for boss enemies in universe. Not only are they superhuman, able to control bees, photosynthetic, etc., they're also the only enemies capable of withstanding deadly force. Some of the only enemies CQC's strongest attacks will not work on, and all because they exhibit uniquely strong will. And this isn't exclusive to the Cobra unit, to be clear. Consider Ocelot, the first boss. While there's video evidence that you can and will take him down with CQC, given the chance, the designers separate you with a chasm, so no throws, no tricks, nothing but guns. Despite Jack's desire to teach Ocelot, he wants you dead, or at least comes at you with lethal force whenever possible. So thanks to his own machinations, and the developers expressing that will through stage design, you're limited to a handful of options, ones you might not be super familiar with or comfortable with, made to play by his rules. Despite being gun-heavy, it's still a narratively significant fight. Ocelot is a petulant show-off, so he'll stop what he's doing to duel you if you spin a revolver around. Occasionally, his soldiers will shoot at you from behind despite his insistence to take you on alone, because you already beat his ass. He doesn't command respect from his unit, despite his skill and showmanship. It's worth noting that you don't beat Ocelot here. The fight's interrupted by the bee guy. The swarm's symbolically suggesting fate, nature twisted to guide you down a specific path. You're forced off the battlefield and into a cave. You don't get the chance to connect or teach Ocelot anything during this third encounter because the Cobras are deliberately setting you on a collision course through their entire unit. The next fight also occurs not long after Ocelot's, after Jack's been forced to survive in the darkness, deprived of light, connection, and forced onto a path he didn't plan for. The first son of the boss is actually rigged up like the Ocelot fight as well. Because the Pain is sitting on an island surrounded by water, Snake is forced, once again, to use anything other than CQC, his signature. Both of these fights limit the player's options and force long-range weapons, even if it's only the tranq gun. But most players will end up using an assault rifle or grenades, because the game's lethal weapons are quicker, more plentiful, and more reliable in this context. Even if the player is effectively experimenting with the system, especially in the room before these back-to-back bosses, they're restricted once again, made to respect the realities of the world. There's a sharp tension between player expression and scripted sequences. Because this pattern is so common among the bosses, I like to think of this tendency as a mechanical expression of those bosses' will. If that sounds a little far-fetched, the bosses that have the least wiggle room for the player's many tools are also the bosses who actively express immediate killing intent. The Fear is fought sometime later. You even get a chance to walk through his boss room, which is littered with corpses and traps, leaving the player wondering what happened and if they're next. It's a nice touch. But on your return, he punctures you with a poison bolt in a cutscene, so you're immediately made to heal yourself before fighting him proper. I like this detail because it almost functions as a hint. Yes, you can shoot every boss to death exactly how you dealt with Ocelot and the Pain, if you're a first-time player anyway, but you don't have to. The bosses also have 2 meters, same as you. And that means, in case the player hasn't been paying attention, that these bosses have multiple victory conditions, even if the first 2 didn't make that obvious. The Fear is the first boss who can be handled with your full range of tools. Sure, most people pop a few mags in the guy and call it a day. Doubly so if they picked up the thermal goggles earlier on and remembered to pull them out of the locker where they found Sokolov. But you don't have to handle him like that. He leaps from tree to tree, which drains his stamina rapidly. He'll try to fill it up by descending, finding food, and eating it, and crawling back up. This gives you the chance to use the world to your advantage. Another kind of player, the kind who's been hunting and gathering, should have realized by this point that poisonous mushrooms and poison dart frogs exist. And when left on the ground, the Fear will eat them voluntarily, potentially wiping his stamina gauge. You can deplete it with some well-timed punches and rolls as well. Guy's fast. It's not easy, but the point is, you have a chance to do something different. Not to mention just stunning and gunning for a quick stamina takedown, or abusing the fake death pill and lighting him on fire. But how does this all factor into the concept of will? The Fear is kind of ridiculous. He prefers to make his opponents feel afraid more than he wants to kill them immediately. In short, he did not inherit the full power of the Satsui no Hado. He lacks clear killing intent, and it's made apparent mechanically. Suddenly you have an opportunity to dunk on this jittering dude, show off your mastery of the mechanics. You fight the End a short time later, and this battle is everything I'm getting at with this essay. You might think, the End? That isn't an emotion.
He is not yet found.
Fucking vibe to carry into battle. And that's true. More accurately, the End symbolizes change, like changing eras or the natural passage of time. He's aging, fading away. To be fair, he's also frequently interpreted as oblivion or a feeling of nothing, acceptance of mortality, maybe, because a radio call in-game more or less explains him that way. But I think the ideas work together. It's why he's old, why he's from a previous generation of soldiers who apparently fought with respect and honor, which I'm not going to interrogate, and at least lines up with the idea of war changing, eventually turning into cold, faceless proxy battles thanks to advancing technology and the nature of geopolitics. It's why he's so well camouflaged. He needs it to survive as a sniper, but also to weather the changing times as his ideals erode under the weight of a new wave. The end is also a triumph of boss design being genuinely unique in the medium, a sniper battle that had to be cropped so it didn't completely halt player progress and tank the game's legacy, and it's the most open-ended boss fight in the game. You can hunt the guy down and stuff him with lead, but it's a painful process. He's slippery and decently fast. If you're comfortable, sneaking works great, as long as you're minding your camo index and crawling where appropriate, but it makes the fight take so long. Thankfully, the cardboard box is inexplicably unaffected by slopes, the way regular movement is, so box up and you can rove the field faster than the game expects. Of course, you can do plenty of funny things if you manage to sneak up on the guy, including holding him up, the only boss you can do that to at all. He's vulnerable to more of the game's tools than the other bosses. But why is it so open-ended? Because the End's will is wavering. He's barely alive, apparently only waking up from a near-comatose state to fight Snake before death. He has triumphant words, but these are the last desperate gasp of a past age. He can't hope to overcome Snake. In fact, he doesn't try. There's a sense that he's accepted the changing times, his own legacy's end, because if he beats you, all he does is put you to sleep. His sniper doesn't fire lethal rounds. It's a big old trank gun. He physically carries you off to a safe room to get up and try again. If this happens, you should realize that something's up. But let's not linger on that. The End is in fact so close to death that the player can save mid-battle, leave for a week, and return to find him dead of old age. In case you didn't know, Snake Eater is one of the greatest games of all time, and funniest of all, the End is an entirely optional boss fight. I don't think my whole bit about Will is a coincidence. No other boss can be picked off early. He's left in his wheelchair asleep as a guard moves to roll him inside. If you picked up the sniper in a side room, you're free to headshot him in a short window, ending the fight before it happens. He isn't properly alert and awake on the field of battle, so his will can't protect him. If you do this, the End's boss fight is replaced with the Ocelot unit, which is more or less a group of souped-up, hyper-vigilant soldiers. But they're still vulnerable to all kinds of player tricks, because not a one of them is as willful or well-trained as any one member of the Cobras. The game's internal reality changes if the player is using their tools and acting on opportunities. The clown is rewarded with the Fiesta, and unlike grenading Sokolov or attempting to kill Ocelot early, the player is not met with a time paradox here. While Snake Eater has to fit into the broader continuity of the trilogy, it's willing to cede some of that space to the player who carries a certain kind of will into battle. He keeps a parrot as a lookout, and killing this bird will whip him into a fury and make him harder to handle. This is neat as a factoid, but taken in context, this older man giving way to the next generation with honor and generosity, well, suddenly the mechanical shift is part and parcel of the narrative reality, and another of the ways the game makes the player consider their actions, consider their violence. Can you believe how he dies? They do this whole respected enemy bit, and then have his eyes bug out and his dentures flying into the sky and he explodes, like a cartoon character. I know when I'm respecting my enemy, I turn their death into the ultimate slapstick cartoon explosion. It's worth noting that you fight two survivalists back to back before you eventually exit the jungle and enter symbolic adulthood, as it were, having stood defiantly against the world, against fate, and left it all behind with renewed purpose. Of course, it's only after that older era of soldier dies, after Snake expresses regret, that the game has you climb the funny 3-minute ladder so it can play its theme song. Wait, that isn't right. Snake hasn't fully eaten his personhood or killed the boss, but he did kill a man who didn't deserve it, a man whose honor Snake could only ever aspire to. And he dies even if you drain his stamina, the quote, non-lethal option, because almost the entire Cobra unit is fitted with micro-bombs. They're soldiers till the end with nowhere to return. You don't actually get a choice in killing them, it's their will. You're caught up in events far bigger than yourself. And really, they want to die on the battlefield. But Snake's been taught to choose what he believes in and act on that. And he's learning that, even still, there's no real way to control the world around him. You hear him express his regret whether you beat him normally or take him out early.
It was his dying wish to fight me, but I disappointed him.
Snake?
Shut the Just as eras turn, Snake's own humanity is crumbling. Being a soldier isn't a game. It's hardly a place to connect. Even if the boss raised him to find joy on the battlefield, made it into a place to belong, war's very nature makes it impossible. So he has to choose to kill his personal feelings, engage dispassionately and mechanically. The Fury is almost as restrictive as Ocelot and the Pain. He's easily the most aggressive boss with the strongest attacks thus far. He only wants you dead, and he can hear better than expected. The stage design works for and against you. He'll notice you at quite a range and sweep across the floor, spilling flame onto the field, leaving you to carefully navigate or avoid him entirely. It's easy enough to stay hidden, but you've got to tackle him head-on eventually. For most of the fight, you're on the run, not a proactive challenger. Most times you're forced, not unlike the Pain, to down him with firearms, pop off a few rounds at a distance and run. He's invulnerable to a lot of your inventory. You can't do much with CQC here. It's right back to how it was. Enemies with iron wills that force you to act instead of allowing you to push the boundaries. This death scene. This is what I'm referring to with hyperreality, magic realism. The guy absolutely did not explode into a pair of screaming fireheads that chased Snake out of the room. It didn't happen. The Sorrow. You can find the corpse of the Sorrow early in the game. He's a dead member of the Cobra unit who the boss believes she can feel, because it rains blood, which... fair enough. And he manifests before Snake when he's sent sailing into the river from a staggering fall. As we know, Metal Gear Solid, and particularly Snake Eater, plays with reality. A ghost isn't particularly absurd in universe. There are psychic individuals and the skulls in MGS5. But what's important is that Snake's squad cannot sense him, stating after the fight that he was simply non-responsive for a number of minutes after falling into the river, and presumed dead. The boss may sense him, but never sees him in-game. He only appears to Snake and the player, optionally appearing in some cutscenes when the player holds a button. It's possible that, like the end, he's saving his last bit of power tethered to the earth for Jack's sake. His relative non-existence lends some credence to the interpretation of the Cobra unit as a symbolic manifestation of Jack's internal journey after the boss's betrayal, but regardless, he also serves a narrative end directed at the player. The Sorrow can be an incredibly easy fight in a number of circumstances. You're intended to die, and revive yourself with the revival pill. That's all it takes, so drown yourself at the start, knock yourself unconscious with the chloroform rag, all of it'll end the fight early. But you're actually meant to walk through the river. Here you'll be faced with the ghosts of enemies you killed, so shot, lit on fire, left to the vultures on the cliff. That isn't an expression, it's a mechanical reality, and the Cobra unit, who all explode regardless of how you beat them. The walk can be brutally challenging if you've killed a lot of enemies, and almost relaxing if you haven't. Most people will face a number of ghosts and get it over with no problem. It's not that complicated, you just path around ghosts and his projectile. It's implied that the Sorrow's will is so strong he persists beyond the grave, lingering on in ethereal form, even able to affect the weather. And Snake's battered beyond repair after a few choice scenes just before this fight, and so the player has almost no means of directing the flow of the battle. You have two choices: get to the end and face the consequences of your actions, or turn away and refuse to look. The Sorrow rejects the Clown Fiesta, the player's will, and simply tells them to look, or live on as a coward. It's narratively beautiful in that way. The fact that how many soldiers you kill isn't really going to punish you, it's still a perfectly completable encounter regardless, but that you have to acknowledge what you did and sit with it, or cheese the fight. Plug your ears. Close your eyes. Do you have the courage to face yourself, and if you don't, do you have the courage to complete your mission? It's only after exiting the river that Snake is spiritually reborn, purpose renewed and tempered. It's not a mistake that he's finally able, after 2 failed seductions on Ava's part, to lower his guard, become vulnerable, even if he won't physically reciprocate. He's a new person, and he's severed his ties with the boss, resolved to end her life, finally disentangled their vaguely Freudian bond and emerged from all his trials, his own person. That's why he's able to storm Groznygrad in broad daylight just after. You weren't forced to slink around the first time, but the fortress was intimidating. Snake benefits more from infiltration tools there than weapons. Now, like your return to Russia at the beginning of Operation Snake Eater, you know the territory, you know yourself, and you can handle anything. Now Volgin. Volgin is the man who the boss apparently defected for. While he's visibly afraid of her and abuses just about everyone else, Jack's left to wonder how she's working for such a disgusting man. He is entirely irredeemable. Volgin is seemingly well-known in universe, with a nickname and his own bizarro lightning powers. He seems like he'd fit into the Cobra unit, but he is not one of the boss's sons. He doesn't know CQC, so you're free to bully him in that way. The only boss who's specifically vulnerable to those moves. It's implied that Snake's emotional journey isn't really complete until he faces the man the boss effectively left him for. Grappled with both her will and his own. It's not that Jack has an explicitly weird relationship with the boss, it's more implied that there's a psychosexual connection between the two, a Freudian, as it were, because their bond is so deep. So striking down Volgin and removing that obstacle between him and the boss is a form of self-actualization, even healing. The Volgin fight can be pretty obnoxious. He wants to be a pro wrestler, but also peppers you with bullets and blasts you with lightning. He's usually handled with gunfire, which he'll block anyway, and otherwise with a thorough non-lethal beatdown. Because Volgin presumably has no emotion he carries into battle, or is mainly fixated on the philosopher's legacy, aka a gigantic pile of cash, instead of ideals or principles, he's open to your throw attack and other bizarre tricks, including throwing certain frogs and mushrooms that will conduct the electricity he fires, rendering him vulnerable. It's a slightly more open-ended fight than others, but he's so persistently threatening you'll need a solid mastery of the mechanics to do anything other than blasting. Volgin eventually retreats and tries to kill you with the Shagohod, a prototype Metal Gear and the entire reason Sokolov matters. This fight is significantly less personal. It's not really about killing Volgin, it's about neutralizing the Shagohod, a machine. So the fight sees you firing off rockets at its treads so you can slap down some damage on the pilot. Eva drives you around the stage. The fight is only partially in your control, and while it's a decent bond-building moment for the pair, it doesn't say much about Snake and his will. Maybe because the fight isn't really about him, but about what his handlers want him to do. The mission. You forego personal expression to do what you came here to do. You could also read it as Snake learning to finally rely on other people, to trust again, which is useful for the final scenes. Eventually, you're forced to face him without a ride, and at least then you're free to style on him a little before progressing. Wow. I wish all my enemies varied this. Blowing up a bridge, dismantling the Shagohod, escaping into the woods, you speedrun a whole relationship with this woman, and you're forced to creep through the jungle, pursued by Russian soldiers, protecting her from danger, keeping her fed, healing her wounds. At the end of the game, Jack's learning to live his own life, and fight for other people that he chooses to. It doesn't matter that she's kind of suspicious and definitely manipulative. Jack believes in her, but he has to leave her side for the final battle. The boss is easily the hardest fight in the game, but also one of the most open. Any weapon works, any tool works, but in this final battle, these characteristics are not a mark of a lack of will on her part, though in a sense, they are. Let me explain. The boss knows she has to die. She makes a point of saying so. This battle only happens because the United States needs a fall guy, a scapegoat to take ownership for a screw-up on their end to avoid nuclear conflict. And so one of their greatest patriots takes the fall. She grooms Jack into her role over the course of the game, wiping out the old Cobra unit and positioning her youngest son to be the greatest soldier of the next generation. At least, that's her intention. She can't meaningfully account for what he'll do or who he'll become in the future. No parent can. This fight is an acceptance of death, like the end before her. She knows her time is up, and her will is wavering. Her fight is loose for two reasons. She'll grab and disarm you, no matter what you're equipped with. Guns, chloroform rag, torch. She'll toss it all away and make you gather it up. Re-equip it if you're dead set on whatever weapon. And this happens because the boss, the game, is testing your will. Whether you can adapt, whether you can use the game's many tools, whether you can seamlessly transition into the next thing, or stick with your guns, as it were. Who are you? Have you decided? Will you finally figure it out when you're forced to act? She says all of this with her CQC, showing affection the only way she can in this context. Like I said, CQC is like an embrace, but she'll toss you to the ground hard. It's one-sided, unless you match her grapple with your own input and embrace her right back. You have to say, "I love you," her way, to parry. The other reason for the looseness of this fight is the boss's Cobra unit name, the Joy. Pure elation on the field of battle. There is no purer joy in Snake Eater than accessing its many tools and mechanical quirks, bending the reality of the game space to the point of breaking. Of course, she wants you to use many weapons and demonstrate your knowledge. She wants to know if you ever learned to see the battlefield how she did. She wants to know if you found the joy. Well, I did. I found the exact spot to light her ass on fire and stun lock her into an unbreakable torch death. Because baby, I'm a clown and this is my goddamn circus. In the end, Jack, or John, escapes Russia, completes his mission, and for nothing. The only person he really loved is dead and by his hands. The person he trusted and replaced her with was a spy, and he got played. No higher principles or posturing towards patriotism could make any of that loss meaningful. It was senseless, foolish violence. Jack found himself swept up in his spy game and a pawn in geopolitical chess, and they want him to take his little award and wait for another assignment. It's only a game. You win and you lose. I don't think anyone could do these things without becoming an unfeeling shell of their former self. Young people, cynical people, do this thing where they reduce other people and the things they say to absurdity. Reductio ad absurdum. This class is pointless, this person is a pseudo-intellectual with nothing to say, etc. But if you're hurting bad enough, it's not hard to see where it comes from. It's a way to retain control, make oneself feel superior when in reality they feel adrift and miserable. It's a way to pave over emotions. Whether or not Snake Eater's mechanical absurdity was intended, it's how it is regardless. And those systems are loud. They communicate that you're in control in that space, that Snake can find a place to belong and a place to forget. It's only when the mission's over and he's back in regular society that we see the break. I didn't come up with the idea that Snake is killing his emotions by killing the members of the Cobra unit, but I do want to add on to it. If we accept that taking out the pain is Jack accepting the reality of the boss's betrayal, that killing the fear is a symbol of his resolve to finish the mission, that beating the end is Jack stepping firmly onto the stage of history as the harbinger of a new generation, that snuffing the fury is Jack suppressing his roiling emotions and fully committing to his task, that overcoming the sorrow is his rebirth into the world, a man capable of succeeding the boss, and ending the joy is his ultimate maturation, no longer capable of trusting society and so brutally good at his job he's effectively peerless, entirely singular. If we accept all that, then Snake Eater needs its mechanics as they are to tell its story. Suddenly there's a reason for MGS3 to be the most mechanical Metal Gear game. Jack, throughout his evolution, is engaging with the battlefield in potentially joyful, potentially exploratory, but otherwise strictly mechanical ways, acting how you believe he would. It's the only place he really belongs. It's the only place he's free to express himself through his actions. He's almost completely alone in the jungle. It's rare that the plot, other relevant characters that is, invade the game space. It's for him, his personal journey. As Jack sloughs off his old skin, pares back his emotions, and works through the trauma, he becomes entirely self-defined, or rather, player-defined through his game actions. If you choose to reduce combat encounters to absurdity, you can still understand Jack completely. Impossibly skilled, far more than any other soldier, left to your own devices, effectively stranded, only able to connect to real people in ways that don't foster meaningful community, and still stuck losing everyone you care about. Big Boss emerges from the systemic framework he thrived in. By the end, you've completed every stage and become the ultimate mercenary, someone who understands the field of battle better than anyone else. And purely in a mechanical sense, you don't panic when things go wrong and you don't get angry at your own mistakes. You have the means at your disposal to handle any challenge. If you end up a clown through your play, that's your individual expression, but either way, it tells the truth. That Big Boss was unbeatable in his time. had no equal. The place he found a sense of belonging in, taught, trusted, and loved in, was used by politicians to make him hurt the person he loved the most. This scenario, turning Jack against the boss, hollows him out completely, unceremoniously cuts the ties he holds to his past. It's the cold part of the game's mechanics made manifest in the character, the critical context that turns creativity, warmth, joy, into rigid, calculated outcomes. Because in the end, it's all a clown fiesta, devoid of clear meaning or reason. Life, I mean. Without humor and imagination, what is there but stark reality? People define reason and meaning for themselves, and these things shift with the times. You can't rely on them. Consensus is the only thing that consistently passes as truth. And that doesn't have to be cynical or nihilistic. There's joy in letting go of a need to control everything. You can be self-contented sitting on the sidelines of the broader world, but Jack needs connection and it's eating him. I think that's what ultimately turns him into a villain, desiring connection like any person, being betrayed twice, being forced to burn all but one bridge, then burning that last one himself. Because it's fake, because it hurt him, and all that's left is an empty field, once beautiful but tainted beyond cure, and no way to unlive all that. As a species, we removed ourselves from the food chain, so we're responsible for creating our own monsters.
Hey, thanks for making it to the end. Here's my $4 patrons. Let me blow your ears out. Adam Welsh, Air Pirate Sid, AK, Acropolon, Alpha 42, Emperor Sandy, Angel Rivera, Angus, Anthony, Aria, Aaron, Ashley, my wife, my darling. I asked K-Bash to make you smile. Also, hi, Merrick. Asriel, Azura, Atticure, Owleye, Axon8, Bear Skeleton, Basement Dweller, Bosch 7, Basil, Be Gay, Do Crimes, Bella, more like Smell Ben M, Big Guile, Big Damn Gamer, Big Papa Spray, Biodigital Jazzman, Bite of Cursed Sushi, Blake Against the Machine, Largle Hargle, Blossom Dante, Boom Dead, BH Operator, Orgor, Born in Shadow, Brandon S, Brendan Hesse, British Goose, Brian McKnight, Cal, Cajun Lady, Cakesar, C-Dub, Casual Male XL, Caesar T, Chiro Hero, Chloric Fox, Cordon, Chris Bromo, Cody Golden, Comfy Moogle, Kami Hog, Couch MOBA, Cosmetic, Crabmonger, Fish Finagler, Trashkers, Crater, Crispy J, Chrono 19D, Cup of the Papa, CW Glasswork, Danky Steak, Swacky Bay, David Castillo, Dara, Dash Granny, Deadward, Destrega. Did you know if you put a wooden spoon on your pot while it's boiling, the pot's spoon water will spill the water pot, the boiling pot water steams spoon wood? Dingus back. Don't read this out loud. Oh no, he did it! Doodle Flu, Doug Prince, DJ Professor K, Dr. House from the critically acclaimed television show House MD, Dr. Cullen PhD, Drop the Bass, Duffman, the protagonist, Dylan Winston, El Jaguar, Electric Song, Elefal, Alpio, Emperor Pickle, Empty Tenchi, Eric Monticello, Erica Black, Excalibur Shines, Storian Hagen, Thnar, Farrakhan's just happy to be Burns here, Maxima, Fazillion, Forte Noir, Frog Vorbis, Frosty Gamer, Gandalf the Garen, Guaranteed, Gigglebite, Glyph Seeker, Gobo Bobo, Gobsmack, Goose 6112, Gregar 700, Ray the Darkest Black, Dark Horde, Gucci Plant, Hatsune Miku's Crack House, Archive, Heeman, Game Station, Helen Dingo, Hermit J, Hebe, Honeymutt, Horn Tiger, Horse Boots. How do you know? You. I just took 7 grams of magic mushrooms and now I'm lost in the woods. I'm supporting K-Bash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer. Inferno galore. IOBG. I punched a sandwich. It's not bad. It's time to sue. It's not good. Ivy, Ruth Langley, Jack Hydrick, Jacob, Jalopy, James, Jams, Jank Dankins, Jason Lasky, Jaden, James Vaughn, Jar of Screaming Eyes, Jay Drito, J.L. Savaris, J. Deus, JB, JJ09, JK Hedgehog, John Bo the Joker, Jordan Joyner, Jorzy Burden, Juicy Frost, June, Kadoki, Callie, K-Chan, Keegan Too Cool, Keith the Thief, Key the Iron Idol, Kata Snack, King Kuma, Key, Kanite Pike, Kitty Caddis, Clock, Tanoe, Cone 2020, Clayton, Crazy Dark Chocolate, Crumperton, Kyle, not that Kyle, KZ Excellent, Lady Weed, Laundry Mom, Lego Sid, Lethal Nibbles, Linkle, Little Big Trouble, Loathsome Dung Eater, Lion Shard, Blonde, Low Red, Low Fat Mogert, Lucas Boy, Blood Mac James, Lunatic, Magic Meows, Malamatic Wolf, Manapool, Manic Pixie Space Pirate, Man in Space, Mal Fever, Mara Ganger, Marcules, Marcus Ramble, Maxwell B, Maximum Dawn, Matey Smacks, Mechanized Memories, Maple Puppet, Mega Boy E Nasty, Mellytan, Mary Bite, Messiah of Rodents, Metal Gear Gashes, Michelle Citrano, Migsy, Mike Deviar, Minadams, Mithras, Moa, Mommy Dummy, Big Titty Goth GF Queen, Monochrome Rainbow, Morgana Black, Maury, Morn, Morte, Modi, Mr. Mango, Mr. PP Pupakaka, Mr. Edie Dab Face McYoink Bomb, Myrna, Naira Nito Torpedo, Neon Dwarf, Nick Krishna, Nick LaRosa, Nifty Rex, Not Nobel, Okami, OJ McMuffins, Old Burgle, Old Man Cranberry, Omni Nerd Zero, 137, Only LK, Kaplant, Oscar, Owlbear Breakfast, Paperlanty, PBK, Pandemic Cowboy, Pelagic Undulation, PK Gaming, P-Mike, Popufur Hitman, Prismatic Dan, Pringle, Probably Not Great, Project Darklight, Punch Fighter Champion, Honosaurus Rex, Quasar McDougal, Quillwork, Raging Ataraxia, Real Beans, Red Death, Reggie Rodriguez, Renteca Bond, Ringed Relay, Rollit's Bowtie, Rolando, RP Gamer, Ryan Machel, Saigon Man,
Siren smells good.
Salmon Coder, Salsa, Salty Smasher, Scribe Slendy, Sakaya no Award, Sensual Coder, Saphirium, Sexy Bionicle GF, Sergeant Shitbrick, Shod, Shintendo, Shut Up Wesley, Singe, Simp,
God.
Sir Doodles a lot. Seriously tired of waiting in line. Sir Giggles XD. Sir Speedster. Skywardly. Sleepy Wabbit. Slippy Sloppy Bippy Boppy. Snart. Small Turtle House. So Zeta Dad. Sock'em Boppers. Space Lizard. Sparks. Spider Dad. Squidget. Star Night Sky. Straffin Battles. Super Dingus. Super Sandwich Guy. Toxin. Jorn Chubbington. Terrence Swift. The artist formerly known as Sam the Sam. The Big Bubby. The Brandorian. The Clown Prince of Cringe. The Good Lord has blessed me. Hallelujah. The Green Loki. The Crispy Boy. The Peacemaker Pyro. The Salt Knight. The Nomad. The Toasted One. Thick Dick Mystic, Thresh, Thrips Hartrop, Tiggles McGuffin, Tim Lobster, Timid the Writer, Total Play, Travis Edwards, Twiddle Chungus, Ty Guy 9001, Udit Singh, Unlawful Skies Crippling Gotcha Addiction, Vid, Vacant Plaza, Valenrist, Venom, Vice Pup, Viewers Like You, Vic, Volkento, Walk In, Get Right in My Bag, Pose, Wayne is Boss, Weeb Trash, well, shit, Waylon, Where Am I? Help? Whiskey Dono, Wrenchin, Zanny Tanner, Gianji, Stravius, Yarrow 12, Yashichi, Zane the Impure, Zane the Pure, Zephigamon, Full Burner, Zero Maru 2, Zero Zalazar, Cyberbunk. If you'd like to help support the show, help me keep investing, making interesting looks at the medium, hit me up on Patreon. See you soon. K-Bash out.